That's pretty, through that yellow flower. There's amazing wildflowers here.
Is the haze working for you?
Not loving it, but we're getting pieces of stuff that don't have haze.
Was it an easy delivery, that one?
Yes, it's very easy.
You caught me. Is it okay if I film you? Mom? Change the subject and ask if she was always such a great dresser.
Kaže, jeste se uvijek tako fino oblačili, imali stila?
Uvijek.
Well, congratulations on the documentary.
Thank you.
It's, on top of it being just a great documentary, it's also one that is very unusual. Because a lot of documentaries, they tend to have narration that sort of defines what you're saying, but this one resists it and doesn't really need it, I think. Was it your intention to keep it without a narration? Or?
I mean, resist is a great word because, you know, I would say I resisted from the beginning actually being in this film or it being too much about me. But there was absolutely several iterations of the film with voiceover. And I would just remember talking to another journalist that there was an iteration where I didn't even use the first person. There was a voiceover where I was saying you and we, and I couldn't even claim the first person or didn't want to. I resisted claiming the first person, right? But after this cut that we all affectionately called the trauma cut, which was this really horrific, unwatchable, you know, bringing together of sort of all of these incredibly difficult moments that had really haunted me over time. When we saw that, we realized, one, we need to stop and get some perspective, and that was thanks to Marilyn Ness, my fabulous producer. I think, like, unlike any other producer, she just said, like, stop working, just no editing, no, just stop. And I did that for 8 months, and in that period of time, I sort of gained some perspective on myself and some distance, and I realized that voiceover was not only sort of impossible, but that it would not serve what I was trying to speak about in any way, and that I could trust that what I wanted to speak about was implicit in the footage. And that was a big journey for me because I like to explain, and, you know, and so to accept that I could share and that would be enough was really profound for me. And, you know, because I think we all are so afraid of the way in which we are seen that we think we need to explain. And of course, that's not what anyone wants from us, really.
Exactly, yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I kept thinking of the Rod Stewart song, or at least the title of it, Every Picture Tells a Story.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And that kind of explains the movie in a sense, because I think with images like these, I mean, it's more about what the viewer brings to it, as well as what you bring to it. And also, it's edited in such a way to where, you know, it does feel like it has a narrative thrust. I mean, you go from situations to situations, and yet it feels like it's a very complete movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the structure of it was so, we thought so much about it, we struggled so much with it, but it was definitely deeply intentional and trying in some ways to replicate in some ways how I experienced this accumulation over time and how it built into something in me that then overpowered me and then I had to work with, right? And so we realized we could create in the structure of the film an analogous experience for the viewer, but the viewer was always a really critical piece of the puzzle, and I feel, you know, sort of there's a deep sense of vindication that I really, in the way that I want to trust any individual that I encounter, I really believed we could trust the audience to be very sophisticated in their capacity to read images, and that is proving to be true. And I think it says something about this moment in history that we're in. It's like we are incredibly fluent in the language of imagery, and younger people are even more fluent. And that I find sort of exciting that is true. That it's not just in talking that human beings connect to each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, you bring that up because it's like these days everybody has a camera, it seems, be it on their phone or wherever, and it's just like with that sort of like images being updated and uploaded almost in a heartbeat. Has that affected your work at all as a camera person?
Well, I mean, I think it has, because I think one, it encourages me to keep thinking about why am I doing what I'm doing? Does it make any sense to be who I am doing what I'm doing? Because, you know, I mean, there's so many different levels of it, obviously. I mean, I think one around sort of journalism and who's telling whose stories, and the sort of rise and possibility of citizen journalism in the political space, all of that is super exciting and interesting. And yet I also think about the many situations I've been in where being an outsider or not knowing the whole story then gives you the opportunity to understand it differently. Not necessarily better, but differently, and sometimes that's useful. Whereas like sometimes the most inside position is a blind position, which is sort of true in making things about the self, right? That you have these incredible blind spots that you don't necessarily ever get. And I'm obsessed by blind spots and sort of thinking, I'm always sort of thinking I can still get behind the, which goes back in some ways to a very personal theme in my life, which I expressed in The Above. I don't know if you saw that short film that I made, but it's about this, you know, surveillance blip in Afghanistan that really reminded me of my own mind as a child. I thought, you know, God could read all of my thoughts, and I thought there's got to be some way that I can be God to my own ideas or my own feelings. But that was in conflict with the construct that I had been taught as a child and that I really believed in. So that tension, I think, is like here in this idea of the blind spot, where I somehow believe if I pay attention enough, I can find all my blind spots. But of course, that paradox is fundamental. They're your blind spots, and you actually have them.
It's interesting to say that because, yeah, those blind spots could make a great movie on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I was trying to make that film too, and I hope this film evokes the presence of my blind spots. I mean, I think that you know, these things about my position that are in the film, that I am American, that I am white, that I am a woman, that I am 50 years old, that I was 23 years old, that I am naive about this place, that I know things about that place. I hope that all of that sort of makes it clear that I get it. I don't see everything, even though I'm trying as hard as I can to do so.
Right, yeah. I mean, it reminds me of the scene where you're in front of the Iraqi prison.
Yeah.
And it has a great "you are there" moment. At the same time, it's almost turns it into a thriller because you don't know what's going to happen there.
And we sure didn't. Yeah.
That was just a very scary moment. It's like, okay, I don't blame you for wanting to get out there. And I also read in an interview where you said you couldn't write a spoiler for this movie, and I think it's very true. Because it's so many different ways you could view it, and it's sort of, again, what the viewer brings to it. I mean, and you ended in a note where it's just like people going around a village. It's sort of like life just goes on.
Yeah. So the final shot of the film is a shot in which I feel so many of there's so much in that shot of sort of how you go with this sort of faith of not knowing what you're going to find, and you just move the camera and you will find something extraordinary.
Yeah.
Period. It always happens. It's all out there. And then you find it and you can follow it, but then you have to let it go. And so that the sort of compression of that metaphor for what filmmaking is. And that there are all the stages of life that are there too. Sort of there's the baby and the struggling man and the hot young girls and the man looking at the girls and the transaction of money, and like it's all in there. And I love that about documentary filmmaking, that there's this sort of, you're collecting evidence before you understand what the story is. And so when you get deeper into the making of the film, you said, and that may not be until the edit round, that you're like, oh, this is what I had found without even knowing that I had found it.
Right.
Which brings us back again to blind spots, right? On a certain level, it's like you're filming blind, even though you're seeing what you're filming.
Yeah, it's interesting. It almost sounds like a Terrence Malick film, because he does his thing and then he also takes moments to film like moments of nature.
Right.
You know, and it's just sort of like how it adds.
Well, I mean, I really remember that with the Thin Red Line of like the explicitness, like the plants feel war, and I remember thinking that that was an idea, and then all of a sudden you feel it. Like there's a couple of shots where you see like leaves trembling or something, and you're like, oh, I believe it, and I've really found that to be true in terms of the way violence stays in places, and you can feel it, and I'm always trying to figure out how can I translate that visually, because it's really, there's some places on this planet you don't want to be standing there because of what has happened there that you can feel. Yeah.
And it's an interesting point, because there are moments where in Bosnia where you shoot at places where people have been assaulted and killed, and it's just like the shadows of those places speak so much about what's happened there, and it's horrifying. I mean, did you do anything with the lighting in those scenes? Or
no, that's me searching, like in that ping pong hall, in Partisan Hall in Foča, so where women were held captive and raped and killed. We went there, and it's controlled by the people who won that part of the war. So there's no acknowledgement that those things happened there. Victims tried to come and put a plaque on that place and got driven out of town. So it's like, it's a total cover. And it's being used, and in some ways it's sort of wonderful that it's been transformed into this other space, but it's not wonderful because it's without acknowledgement of what happened there. And so here we are, like filming this hall full of girls playing ping pongs where all these young girls were raped in the past, and I was just searching for how can I convey this, and I went into the little back hallway, and then this light just started moving on the floor, and it reminded me so much of the light that was moving inside of the truck that dragged James Byrd to his death. I went and filmed that at sort of high noon, and I got up in the cab of that truck, which was a horrible place to be, and there were shadows just crawling all over the inside of the truck, and it really felt alive. And then I went behind the truck and I stepped on a nail and I bled all over the back of the ground behind the truck. And it was one of those, it was too much. At that point it was just sort of too much. I was like, I have to stop. Like, this place is too haunted. This truck is too haunted. But sometimes it manifests like in those kind of physical ways when you're in these places. But a lot of times it doesn't, and you're searching for how do I compose an image that will maybe convey something about what's here.
Yeah, no, that's another interesting part of the film, because obviously, I mean, one of the images that stays with me is when one of the lawyers, or I think it was a cop, starts putting stuff out, and he reminds like, God, these guys are really stupid, and then he just freezes. Right,
and he does that thing. He sort of has, it's like, and he has a physical. He like touches his nose and sort of. It's like a. I've seen this often with people who've been through extreme violence. Something physical will happen when they'll talk about, like they'll burp or they'll yawn, and like these really sort of. You saw it in The Act of Killing too. There's like these moments where it's like it's in their body physically and it manifests. Yeah, I love that moment with him.
Yeah, that was definitely.
You know, there's something in that box.
Yes, there is.
Right. Yeah.
What was in the box?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's that question from Seven. But yeah, also, I had just seen Citizen 4 a couple of days ago. I didn't get to see it when it came out.
Oh, wow.
And was just completely blown away by it. I can't even imagine what it was like filming it.
Yeah.
It must have been guerrilla style filmmaking.
Well, I mean, it wasn't guerrilla style.
Oh, okay.
In a certain way, I mean, it was very deliberate. We were very careful. Everything was very careful and very considered. And then sort of once we would go somewhere, it was really thinking intentionally of what are we doing here and what does this mean? And I'm so interested in the way that there's ways of framing that exist in that film that sort of came out of the work that Laura and I did on The Oath, and then we found the way to repeat them. And Laura shot that shot of Edward through the window, but we had been like really actively the entire time of, we filmed Julian Assange before Edward came into the picture, and we kept thinking of sort of how do we talk about these ideas of surveillance, privacy, and we kept thinking like there's a shot through a window, right? And then it was like the perfect shot for that moment in the film. And that was so satisfying to have sort of these conversations about aesthetics that we'd had manifest in the most real life way possible. And she shot all the stuff with Edward in the hotel room in Hong Kong. And I'm kind of, it's been one of the great regrets of my life that I didn't get to be there, but there is a way in which, thank goodness it wasn't me, because I would have been flipping out about the aesthetics of that hotel room, and I would have been so focused on like trying to frame out that big white headboard that I'm not sure I would have done the greatest job of filming it.
Yeah. And in this movie, in Cameraperson, I mean, there's some images from that. One that stands out is the cement, which I believe is what held the encrypted drive.
Yeah.
And that was that like the best piece? Was that like the only piece of film you could add to Cameraperson from? It was the footage that expressed the fear, the paranoia, the level of this is so important that we're going to hide it in concrete. Sort of the mystery, the thriller aspect of it, and the sort of deliberate obtuseness that we had to live with for a couple of years. Like Laura and I were incredibly close to the vest for a very long period of time, which is so different from how I am as a person. I love transparency, and I like to talk about things, and I like to gossip, and I'm like, so to not speak was very, very powerful experience for me, and I wanted that, section to be sort of deliberately hidden from the viewer or withheld to express like my difficult, because you see me not withholding in so much of the film, and I've withheld the location, I've withheld what it is explicitly, and you have to do work to know what it is. And there are also moments we see a view of your personal life with your parents and your children. Was that something that you wanted to put in at the very start of making this documentary, or is that something that just sort of came along? It came because the footage with my mother is so paradoxical. It's such an admission of how I betray her, and it's also a declaration of how much I love her, and it's both of those things simultaneously, sort of in equal measure. And it feels like, for me, it corresponds to the admission I'm making about, the complex paradoxes of filming other people's lives, and sort of, where you honor them and where you betray them simultaneously. Yeah, well, it definitely felt like a declaration of love more than anything else.
Good.
Yeah. But seriously, great documentary, in a year of great documentaries. This that stand out at the top, because it's been a great year for documentaries.
Really, right?
Yeah, not a great year for movies.
Yeah, but we are a community. The documentary community is a community, and we are raising the bar for each other. There's some really interesting conversations that are happening between us that you can see the evidence of in the films, which is super cool to be a part of.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's good. Great.
Great. Well, thank you very
Yeah,
much for your
thank
time,
you,
Kirsten.
National Sarcasm Society.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.